Welcome back to Core Motivations Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Connolly. I'm a certified Enneagram coach and a Symbis marriage coach. So glad you're here with us today. Whether it's for the first time or returning, it's great to have you joining us. Sometimes I find it important to create a signpost stating the topic and briefly previewing what we'll cover. For today, though, let's just dive in. So, let's get into it. Circling back to last week, let me start by saying this is me checking in with you. Oh, but first, out of curiosity, how many of you went and checked out Love is Blind? Leave your response in the comment section or in the review. Last week's episode, we talked about relationships, sticking to your non-negotiables, identifying red flags, asking important questions, not holding back, asking the hard questions, and identifying the value in those hard questions. See, because what it does is it allows the opportunity to really get to know the person before committing, creating a space that allows each person to dive into the deep end. So I challenged you to reflect on your current relationship, as well as the potential to ask questions. Did that instigate conversations, perhaps with your partner or perhaps with yourself, taking a pulse of where you are? How did it go? Are there things that you discovered about your partner, the person you're dating, or better still, discovered something new about yourself? We don't really know what we like or want in our life unless we ask, right? And reflect on our life and the people that are in it. I believe that it is vital to take stock. Asking, am I allowing certain unhealthy energy in my life? And if I am, how do I or what do I do to move through, around, or past these kinds of things? There's a phrase I've heard often, and I think I remember it. Well, a version of it anyway, so I won't quote, but it goes a little something like this: reduce your exposure to toxic people. I'm not saying I have all the answers. Rather, I'm just, like you, being challenged to reflect on these things. Some recommendations to work through or work them out with somebody that is not directly connected. I'm talking about maybe a counselor, maybe a coaching session. And a coach right here, that's me, talking with someone whom you trust. Now, I just want to caution you a little bit there. Keep in mind the person that you pick, they should be a person that is not there to tell you what you want to hear, but to listen and even challenge you to have a different perspective, make adjustments, and course correct while they're encouraging you to take action. You see, we all need to be challenged to see a different side to something. And I believe it is one of the factors towards self-awareness. There are a multitude of things out there that we can claim as resources. For example, podcasts. There are so many different options and topics about awareness and self-care and self-love and things that will help you understand relationships. I know hard conversations are, well, obviously hard, but we must find a way to have them. You see, when we leave things unsaid, it's possible that those things we didn't talk about could have been the thing that helped us, whether it's you as a single person, someone you might be considering to be in a relationship, with, as well as those that are in committed relationships, regardless of the amount of time you've been together. You see, because there are many facets of a person. So, that being said, doing the prep before the commitment is vital. And please do not ignore the weird feeling in your chest, gut, or otherwise. Please don't ignore the red flags and making sacrifices to your non negotiables. My personal example of non negotiable, and again, this is not to make light of the depth of the things in regards to relationships. So keep that in mind as I talk about my non negotiable that wasn't considered. When we were in the process of moving to Arizona, of course, looking for the right place was important, and more specifically, finding a place close to my husband's work. And of course, while I could blame our realtor, truth is she wasn't our tour guide. She helped us gain access to houses that we were interested in and made sure that we were staying in our budget. And sadly, the conflict for me is I love our home, the neighborhood, and all the access to shopping. However, here's the rub: my husband spends much of his week in the car driving to and from work. And what I've learned from that, due to ignoring or allowing the non negotiables to be shifted, we stopped paying attention to those. And in turn, we made ourselves small, let go of what was actually important and vital. And I keep asking these things, but for the sake of what? Well, I don't even know what that is, but I'm sure we could come up with lots of reasons. We didn't show up for ourselves. We set aside our non negotiable, and in turn, we made it okay to forget about the things that were important to us, believing we would just figure it out, the distance and the sacrifices we made, believing this was our only alternative. The other interesting thing about this, and I don't think we actually said this, as everything was new and different to us. Side note, maybe I've mentioned this before, almost the entirety of my marriage, my husband has worked from home. And so we didn't really understand the depth of a commute. Truth was, I don't believe we understood the gravity and the impact of the decision to live so far away from his work. Yes, he's experienced commuting to work, but gosh, this was 19, 20 years ago. And yet we went with this plan. Now, I'm sure if we would have visited the area more than a couple of days and drove around and talked with more of the locals, spent more time researching neighborhoods, and even drive from the areas we were considering during rush hour traffic, I believe we would have made a more sound choice based on those factors. And again, I'm not sad with our choice. I just appreciate how hard it is to drive. Well, on paper, it's 30 minutes away, but in actuality, he drives upwards of an hour each way. So 2 hours spent just in the car. Final thought about relationships where we're seeking to understand about that person you are wanting to have a relationship with or are currently in. This list, I believe, is vital and important. So keep it at the ready, starting with pay attention. How does a person answer the questions that you're presenting? Don't rush the process. Trust, but verify. Check in with other people that might know them if you can. Stay alert. Listen to that still small voice and take stock, pros and cons lists. Weigh the options and ask yourself questions rather than convincing yourself that it's fine. Everything is fine. It's just fine. It's fine. Long ago, someone suggested to ask this important question to your potential person: how do you get along with your family, especially your parents? There are many ways to set yourself up for failure, but what if we went into a relationship with eyes wide open, alert, with confidence, knowing I have all the information to succeed, be healthy, and experience top level joy in a relationship? May we all be confident in what we know, seek understanding of the things that we don't, and promise to ourselves we are worth having the best of the best, creating a life that is full of healthy love. And that in that, sharing it with the right person, not the right person for now. We can change the trajectory of these relationships by asking just one of these questions, the one that helps you avoid the red flags and reminds us that we get to set boundaries and establish our non negotiables. So, with that, happy relationshiping. Last time we also talked about the men in our lives, dads, bonus dads, mentors, et al., and the impact that they have or had on our life. And even the sadness of not having the male figure for the good in your life at all stages. I believe we did a pretty good job of talking about Father's Day, while short, of course. I hope that we can walk away from both of these topics feeling encouraged. I hope that is your experience. Well, shall we move onward and forward to today's topic? Well, here we go. Doesn't it seem like certain times of the year were flooded with holidays back to back? Okay, well, maybe there is a bit of a gap between some. But recently, we celebrated Juneteenth, Father's Day, and now Independence Day, commonly known as the 4th of July. But calendar holidays really seem to not provide time to recoup from the last. Oh, gee, what a horrible problem to have. But what does this have to do with today? Well, the United States is getting ready to celebrate another 4th of July. However, this is kind of a big one. It is the 250th celebration of these United States. Our country has both a rich history, but also young compared to others. And I know you were asking, why do we celebrate 4th of July? Well, are you ready for a history lesson? I knew you would be. You see, this celebration is for the birth, if you will, of Americans' independence, the adoption of the Declaration of Independence, which was the first formal statement by a nation's people asserting their right to choose their own government. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay, so already that's a lot, right? Well, let's back up a little bit. What did our country and world look like before this happened? See, it all started out with the Revolutionary War. Okay, that's not the very beginning, but for today, that is where we will start. So you see, tensions they were building during this period of time. There were new territories under the power of the crown, which of course brought the unpopular taxes, right? Because we all love taxes. So you see, these taxes were being imposed by the British government. And of course, as we experience even today, when we, people, feel strongly about something, we protest. And during this time, protests they heated up over these rights not being fair or cohesive. I'm trying not to go too far into the weeds. However, maybe many of us don't know this part of the history. But before the United States of America was established, the continent was home to hundreds of independent indigenous nations. So during this time, there were specific eras. And so we had an indigenous era, which included the Mississippian culture and the ancestral Puebloans. Then the colonial from Christopher Columbus, who was an explorer. In fact, he made 4 trips across the Atlantic Ocean from Spain in 1492, 93, 98, and 1502, where he was determined to find a direct water route west from Europe to Asia. But he did, in fact, stumble upon the Americas. Now, he didn't discover the so-called New World because millions of people already lived there. But what his journey marked was the beginning of centuries of exploration and colonization of North and South America. Believe me, I'm getting somewhere with all this. This era included British America, New Spain, and New France. Upon European colonization, the land, it was divided into colonies claimed by the British, Spanish, and French, which made up the 13 colonies. I love history, and I really think that we don't know enough. Side note, having had hosted exchange students, I found that they knew far more about their country and its history than I did of mine. So I guess that's why I deem it important. Okay, so back to the history. Officially being named the United States of America, September 9th, it was not until the Second Congress officially replaced the name United Colonies with the name United States of America. So that is where the Declaration of Independence came to be, which was used by the Continental Congress in 1776. So this historic document served the 13 American colonies with its political ties to Great Britain and King George III, making the official birth of the United States as a free, independent nation. Okay, here's some extra bonus historical information. John Adams, he believed July 2nd was actually the correct date on which to celebrate the birth of America's independence, and reportedly turned down invitations to appear at the July 4th events in protest. Also, Adams and Thomas Jefferson both died on July 4th in 1846, which would have been the 50th anniversary of the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. And here's some interesting information. The signers of the Declaration, average age was 45, and the oldest was 70. However, the youngest was 27. Some say that Edward Rutledge, he was the youngest at 26 years old. And another interesting tidbit, Thomas Lynch Sr. and Thomas Lynch Jr. were the only father-son to serve in Congress. Okay, so some key moments in the years preceding the first July 4th. And of course, there became a time for expansion from the 13 colonies. And it started with the Louisiana Purchase, which nearly doubled the size of the nation. So following this, the Civil Rights Movement, the Industrial Revolution, with agriculture, factories, and railroads rapidly growing, the Technology Revolution, which was the way we communicated with letters to then digital communication, and of course, global travel. Life expectancy increased. Lifestyle changed from manual and handmade clothing, where we moved towards electricity, consumer goods, and widespread access to education, rounding the corner of women's rights and roles. And in 1920, women gained the right to vote. Now, there are many things to account for, but for the sake of this celebration of the 250th year of our United States, I encourage you to look at our history. There is so much there. I also thought I would throw in a few interesting suggested special themes for 2026. So this year, we have the American 250 Initiative, which is highlighting efforts to engage all 350 million Americans in celebrating 250 years since the Declaration of Independence. Another special theme is looking forward and back, where we reflect on the nation's 250-year journey from revolution to expansion and technology innovation, which we touched on a little bit. And of course, opportunities to give back through initiatives like America Gives. And finally, how about creating a time capsule for future generations through historical legacy? Have you ever done one of those? It's pretty cool. Some of the way this special day was celebrated over the years was through fireworks, gun salutes, and ringing of bells. So I wonder, what is this 4th of July for you? There are so many things happening. I think what's really cool is that the World Cup is happening right now, and the celebrations that are happening so close to our 4th of July Independence of America celebration. What will you do? Will you go watch firework displays? Will you set off your own firework display? How about barbecues? Do you have family traditions, places you like to go, people you hang out with, things that you do? Perhaps you could share them in the comments and reviews. And finally, a special request from me to you. Make sure to take care of your pets and keep your family safe. With that, may you have a fun, safe, filled day celebrating our country and these 250 years. Oh, wait, I hope you don't think that is the end of our time together. I haven't shared with you the fun stuff. Here goes. This podcast is not a substitute for medical care. The materials, movies, videos, or books referred to in this podcast are recommendations only. The views expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the podcast host. That's me or sponsors. Join me each week as we dive into all things Enneagram, self-care ideas, self-love patterns and rhythms. Share ideas from other reputable authors, doctors, and my favorite podcasters. We're counting on you to help spread the word about core motivations. So hit the follow button, share this episode with someone, and please leave a review. You can find me, Michelle, on Instagram at coremotivations_coach or through email, michelle@coremotivationscoach.com. So let me leave you with this. Until next time, and as always,